Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Whether you are a sales professional, not in sales, but interested in helping people solve problems, or a founder, CEO who is looking to grow your business, you'll find practical tools, stories, and experience you can apply to your role. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm here with Mike Simmons, the co-founder of Catalyst Sale. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Jody.
Mike, it's always great to be here with you, and we have a guest, so there's three of us today.
I am pretty excited about this guest. And this guest, just a little for context and background, introduced to Liz through some folks who have been on the podcast previously, Jeff Bajorek and Christy Walters.
Yes, they were fantastic. And I know anybody they introduce us to is going to be great. And our guest is Liz Wendling. She's a sales coach and consultant for women, sales professionals, and a few smart men. I love that part, a few smart men. And she is the author of a new book called Sell Without Selling Your Soul.
Liz, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So, Sell Without Selling Your Soul. Why that title? Why the book? What inspired you to write it?
Oh, well, after going back and forth probably about 22 times trying to come up with that title, it was the first title I came up with, and then I resisted it so much. And I don't know where the resistance came from, but eventually I just finally leaned into it and said, no, this is the title. And I chose to write this book at this time because I felt like it was time for women to reframe what it is to sell and to bring some simplicity and some integrity to the evolving sales world and teach women the skills that create more influence, help them to generate more confidence when they're navigating their sales conversations. And since we're all selling something and selling remains such a vital part of everyone's business, I felt like it was time to just drop the sales baggage and get on with the only thing that keeps all of our businesses in business, and that's sales. We can't avoid the only thing that keeps us in business.
Awesome. One of the quotes that resonated for me, and this was an early one in the book, but selling is the ability to develop strong, trusting relationships with people. Selling is about stepping into your sales conversations with authenticity, competence, and rock solid confidence, and doing it in a way that fits you and your personality. You choose how you want to sell. What does that mean to you?
Well, what that means is every time I talk to groups, women come up to me and say, I just hate to sell, or I hate how I feel when I'm in a sales conversation. And they're focusing on all the negative aspects of selling instead of stepping in and saying, you know what? I know I have to do it, but I want to be confident when I'm doing it. I want to learn the language that motivates and then inspires people. I want to have that rock solid confidence. So instead of focusing on what they don't want, I want them to focus on what they do want, and they have a say in how they show up. Like we all do. We get to say how we show up in every aspect of our life. And if women keep believing that they have to be a certain way to be the salesperson for their business, it's going to be a tough ride on the revenue roller coaster. So they've got to lean into the fact that, yes, they are the salesperson for their business, and they get to choose how they want to show up and whether they want to show up being wishy-washy or passive, or do they want to show up as the most confident self that they can be.
So newsflash to everybody out there, I'm not a woman. However, I think all of this stuff applies whether you're male or female.
It does. It truly does, Mike. Yes.
So Liz, as we talk, a lot of times I'll say we, and I know that the focus here is how do you help women make this transition? But why do you think we as sales professionals struggle with that identity and that confidence and that kind of feeling like, hey, I have to do it this way. I can't really own my own voice. Why do we struggle with that?
Well, I would call it the love-hate relationship that a lot of people have with sales and selling. And it's not just women. Men have some of the same issues. They love what they do, but they hate to sell. They love what they do, but they hate the process of actually having to go out and find new business and generate new business. They love their work, but they hate the idea that they have to step into the role as the salesperson in their business. And to many, they think sales is daunting, and it's this unsavory task that should be avoided at all costs. And every time they step into that mindset, they create a fatal business strategy. There's just no way that they can walk into a sales conversation with a mindset like that and expect to grow their business and close business. So I just tell people, if you're reluctant to sell, you have any hatred around sales, it means you're doing it wrong. It means that you haven't stepped into your power and found a way of selling that is truly comfortable for you and who you are.
So what are some of the common mistakes? Like, what are some of the things that they're doing wrong?
Well, when they first meet someone, they feel like they have to talk about themselves to make themselves comfortable. They come into a sales conversation maybe feeling a little anxious, nervous, scared, fearful. And the fastest way to squash all of that is to start talking about themselves. And they start a conversation in a very self-serving way, talking about themselves and their business and how great they are. When in fact, the best way to calm that is to let the other person start talking, is to ask a few questions and let somebody else do the talking while you sit and listen and relax. So they come across right out of the gate as it's all about me and I'm going to make this conversation about me. And it sends a message to the other person that this person really is only in it for the sale. He or she doesn't really care about me. So in an effort to try to get rid of some of their fear, they show up as self-serving versus confident.
Yeah, the reminder I like to use, or the trigger that I like to use, is just kind of looking in the mirror and remembering, hey, I've got 2 ears and one mouth. That's designed that way for a reason, I would expect.
Yes, exactly. But when they get in that conversation, all of that goes out the window because they're stuck up in their head and they're not in their body anymore. And when you're stuck up in your head, you start talking and talking and talking and not really focusing on the other person. And the other person starts making very quick decisions about, I don't want to do business with this person. I can't see myself doing business with a person like this. And within the first few moments, that potential client has decided you're not it. And so the ability to turn that around and be focused on the other person sends a message that you really are here to have a conversation to see if there's a fit and you really do care. So it's a subtle but very powerful shift.
I think one of the words that you use a lot in the book is authentic, authenticity, authentically, and these iterations of authentic. Why is it important to be authentic?
Well, if you're not being yourself when you show up, first of all, people are going to pick up on that.
Yep.
But the other thing about authenticity, and I touch on it in the book as well, is that people think authenticity is a sales strategy. They actually think that they have to teach themselves to be authentic. And I tell people, if you're not authentic, you can't learn to be authentic. You don't learn authentic sales skills. You're an authentic person to begin with great sales skills. So there are a lot of gurus out there selling programs called Sales Authenticity that learn how to sell by being authentic, as if everybody else on the planet is not doing it in an authentic way. So I kind of squash that in the book and talk about how it's not a strategy. You either are or you aren't. You first decide how you want to show up, and you want to be genuine, you want to be kind and authentic. But if you have crappy skills to back that up, it doesn't matter how authentic you are if you don't have the skills to move someone from interested to an invested.
Yeah. And as we get into the discussion a little bit deeper, I do want to get into the skills, but I want to kind of pick apart this authenticity piece a little bit further. And, it really, the thing that resonates for me is this whole, you've got to be you. So your script is not going to work. Like I could write a list of questions for you, Liz. And if you start parroting out those questions, you're no longer Liz, you're some kind of iteration of me. So what are some things that people can do when they struggle with this idea of confidently being themselves and really just putting their own person or their own personality out there in conversations with others?
Great question. And one of the things that I teach people is if something doesn't feel right coming out of your mouth, out of your body, something that you're saying, whether you're tapping it out of an email or leaving a voicemail, that's your first sign that something is off in your process. And people will say, well, my uncle taught me how to do this, and my past boss told me to use this or to say this in my presentations or my emails. And they knew inherently that it wasn't right for them, but they didn't know what to replace it with. They didn't know that they had an option to change their language. They just were taught that this is a technique, or this is a sales strategy that you should use because it worked for me. Well, you're not like that. So you have to stop long enough and say, wait a second, that may have worked for that person, but this doesn't feel right to me. So I'm going to have to go into my smart head and figure out how I can do and say the same thing in a way that resonates with me. So I think people don't stop long enough to say, ooh, that doesn't sound like me, but let me figure out how I can try to say the same thing with the same and create an impact. Because if you're using words that aren't yours or a process that isn't yours, it's like running around with someone else's clothes on all day. It doesn't fit you. You're never going to show up as your best self if you've got somebody else's clothes on.
Absolutely. And one of the other things that resonated for me as you were talking through that is the importance of doing the reps, the importance of continuing to have these conversations and testing ideas and feeling and just, feeling is another piece, but feeling what feels comfortable as you go through these discussions.
Because more and more people, they do feel it on some level. They'll even say to me, oh, I hate when I have to do a follow-up email, or I hate following up with people. And then when I find out why, well, it's because they're following up the same way that we've been following up for the last 40 years, and everybody on the planet is using the same F word. Well, of course, you don't want to follow up using that word because it's not working anymore. So they just feel like they're leaving follow-up message after follow-up message, and it's not getting them anywhere. But they don't know what to replace that with.
So one of the other things that came up in the book is the idea of the human element. And a lot of what we're talking about is about human interaction. How does technology play a role in this? And can technology replace the human element?
Oh, I'm going to flat out say, hell no, absolutely not. And in some areas it might, but you can't outsource the human element. You can't outsource empathy and connection and helping someone make a good decision. You'll never be able to outsource that. The human element is always going to be there in our sales conversations, unless you're selling a product on the internet where you never have to speak to someone. But those conversations that we have, even if we do have a service that we're selling online, at some point we're going to hop on the phone with someone. And if we don't have a heart-to-heart conversation with someone versus that head-to-head conversation, we're not going to move business. So it's being able to have those conversations with people at that human level that shows I'm a human, you're a human, let's talk this out. And if we're a good fit, I'll walk you through the process.
So what does fit mean to you?
Say the word again.
What does fit?
Oh, fit. If we're a good fit, if it makes sense for us to work together, if there is mutual understanding and what I sell is what you need, then you and I can talk about what that would look like to move forward. So a good pair, a good match.
Yeah. I think it's amazing how we tend to overcomplicate this stuff. You know?
I tell people, stop making selling so darn hard and realize that, yes, it's a conversation, but there's also skills that support that conversation so that it moves to a successful ending, whether it's a no, thank you, I'm good, and maybe I'll call you in a few months, or let's do business together. But there has to be a way to have this conversation where we don't bring all the baggage of the past into a conversation that no longer needs it.
I promise everybody we will get into some of the skill discussion, but I've got one more quote that I want to bring out from the book, which is, when I read it, I think more of process. But anything worth doing and doing well takes time and energy. The hardest part is creating energy and momentum and keeping it going. It's igniting the fire first, and then every once in a while throwing another log on that fire to keep it burning. So how do you keep yourself moving forward and keep throwing logs on the fire? And when do you know when to throw a log on a fire? And what does this part of the process look like for you?
Well, for me, it is knowing I have a plan each week. It isn't heavily structured plan. I would call it a loosely structured plan of what I know I need to accomplish in my week or the first part of the week. And I'm a very disciplined person out of the gate anyway. And sometimes it's hard to teach people how to be disciplined. So I have that going for me and I know what I need to do. And I call it just getting stuff done. And for me, I could feel it. It's a feeling in my body. I know when I'm slacking or when I'm not doing something I need to do. We all know what it feels like to procrastinate or say to ourselves, oh gosh, I know I need to do that. And as soon as I say that to myself, I know that that's when I have to take immediate action. That's when I've got to get a log and throw it on the fire. And I call it inspired action, not just doing the action because I said I was going to do it. It's being inspired that, I just caught myself wanting to slack off. And what can I do that can inspire me right now so that I can move what I need to do, move it forward?
So when you go through that process, do you use a whiteboard? Do you use like an index card? Do you jot notes down in maybe a Google Doc or Evernote? Or like, what does that specific practice look like for you?
For me, it is paper and pencil with a big fat eraser next to it, because when I write it and I can see it, so first it's in my head, then I get it on paper. And then when I write it, it really becomes real for me, because anything I write down, it always means it's supposed to be something I'm supposed to either remember or do. People don't write things down for no reason. So for me, I've trained myself that if it's on paper, it's something that was important, something I thought was important. And if sometimes I'll write something down and go, all right, well, that was important then, but not anymore. And then I'll just erase it. But everything that's in my head that I know either has to get done or it's a thought that I had goes on a piece of paper, and I look at it every single day.
That's awesome. I'd like to challenge everybody out there who's listening to this, who is thinking about, whether or not, if they're challenged with execution, if they're challenged with getting things done, if they're challenged with moving the ball forward, if they find themselves kind of stuck in this rut or stuck in this same place, ask yourself, how often do I write down the thing or things that I need to do, the important things that I need to accomplish? It's not enough just to think about it. It's about putting it on paper. For me, I use a whiteboard. I also use index cards. I move around from a flow perspective. But if you're not going through that practice, you're going to have a really hard time executing on those things that are in front of you. And it's not like they're just going to disappear.
That's right. And then when they're on paper or somewhere around you, that's when you can take inspired action. You could look down and go, all right, I could take care of these two things right away. And then that gives me the confidence. I feel good that I knocked off two things off my list, especially when I'm feeling like I'm not being very productive.
Yeah. So from a coaching and an accountability and a productive standpoint, how do you leverage your network to help keep you on task?
You mean, how do I reach out to my network?
Yeah. Do you lean on others? Do you have an accountability partner?
Yes. Yeah, I actually am in a mastermind group, and I have 2 accountability partners, and we stay on top. We get together once a week virtually and create our tasks and our plans and what we plan on doing. Short term, very immediate short term, and then a little bit less of short term, maybe in the course of a month, and then long-term goals. So one of them might be that I've got to finish an audio program I'm working on to match up with the book that's being edited and completed right now. I have 45 more days that I can do that. And I know it's in my time frame, but I've committed that it will be done by a specific date. All the way to next year, I want to write another book. So short term, real immediate, all the way to long term. And they hold my feet to the fire, and we do it for each other. And I like that.
Awesome. And I'm going back into the book. You've got a quote in here where you say, you won't be able to revamp your business overnight, but you will be able to transform it over time by taking the key steps to ensure its success, or key steps that ensures its success. Can you talk a bit about that and what that means to you?
What that is, I call that a lot of the knowing doing gap. I know what I need to do, but I don't do it. I know I'm supposed to drink 8 glasses of water a day, but I just don't. And it's making that decision of I know what I need to do, but then opting out of not doing it. So it is truly about figuring out what you need to do, what parts of your business either have a gaping hole in it, aren't working the way that they should be or used to work, and pulling it apart far enough to figure out what are the parts and pieces that work, what don't work anymore, how do I need to revamp that or make some adjustments to that, all the way to do I need to start from scratch? But it's getting those key steps in place. And it could be from a standpoint from when I go to a networking event, what do I do to maximize that networking event? To what happens if I'm meeting someone for initial consultation? How do I maximize that? Not just in the moment that I'm having it. How do I stay in contact with people? How do I move them through a process where they might not be ready today, but they're ready down the road? How do I not drop the ball on business that I started? Too many people drop the ball because they don't want to stay in the process, or they don't have a plan in place to keep somebody in the loop and in that process. So they just forget about that person, and that person just becomes another person that comes out their funnel with no resolution at all. So those key steps of, if you're going to do the activity, you want to build a process around it so that it ensures it to its successful ending. Why go to a networking event if you're not going to do anything after you leave that event? Or why go to a conference if you're not going to stay in touch with the people whose business cards you took home? And I can go on and on about that. It's Yeah, I know what I need to do. Oh, I just got busy when I got home and I've got a stack of business cards here and it's been 3 months since the conference. Well, you lost any motivation or any fire that was started around that. And it's really hard to pick that ball up after it's been dropped for so long.
Yeah, and what really resonates for me there is is how well do you hold yourself accountable to the process or design that you have committed yourself to?
Yeah. When someone says to me, I know I'm supposed to follow up, but I don't, or I get busy, I call that self-sabotage. You know what you need to do, but you use the excuse that you're too busy to get back to someone who wants to know more about who you are and what you do. That is self-sabotage and a way to keep yourself on that revenue roller coaster versus just picking up and making that phone call or sending that email and putting that ball back in play.
So I want to shift into the discussion around skills. And from a skills perspective, what are some skills that we can work on? Let's say I'm a new rep, I'm struggling with kind of finding my own flow and finding my own kind of my own thing, my own rails that I want to work within. What are some skills that I can focus time and attention on that'll help me be a better sales professional going forward?
Oh, many of them. But the one that jumps out at me right now is good old-fashioned people skills and truly realizing that we're human beings talking to other human beings and coming from that place of not from my head where I need to sell this person or I need to act a certain way. In the book, I talk about just getting back in your body and realizing that you're just another human being meeting another human being. And let's treat each other that way, not as a prospect and a suspect or someone I'm trying to close. Talk to someone from your people skills and communication skills.
Yeah, Liz, how often do you like being closed?
Oh, never.
And how often do you like buying things?
All the time. I do. And I appreciate it. I just bought a new computer. Yeah. And I really appreciated how the gentleman in the store was talking to me. First, he did what I teach everybody to do. Ask me questions.
Yep.
Why are you looking for a new computer? Why isn't your old computer working? What do you want to do with the new one that the old one doesn't do? Let's talk about how long you want to keep this computer. And ask me the kind of questions that I would hope someone would ask me versus just trying to sell me something that was maybe the special of the day and that he got a bonus if he sold one more of those computers. I felt like he was truly getting in my world to figure out what I really needed. And then I went ahead and bought it.
When you hit on a key word earlier, empathy. And I mean, the only way that you can exhibit empathy or empathize with others is by putting yourself in their shoes, by understanding where they're coming from and what they care about and why they care about those things and what they're challenged with. And it's really hard to do that if you don't start with asking a bunch of questions. If you start with talking about your background and where you grew up and what solution your product does and how many great customers are working with you, all that is about you. It's not getting back to them, which is let's get them talking about themselves.
And empathy is one of those words that's thrown around, and not everybody knows exactly how to get there and what it feels like when you can empathize with someone. But that's another one of the areas. Start empathizing with your friends and your family. Test it out there first, because I see empathy when I'm doing role plays with people. I see them trying to fake empathy and say things like, oh, that really sucks. Or, oh yeah, I get it. Yeah, I could feel your pain. No, you don't. You're stuck up in your head thinking about the next thing you want to say to me. Really feel that empathy for someone and actually stop long enough to go, man, that really does suck. And say it from your heart, not your head. I watch a lot of people do that in role plays and they think I call it drive-by empathy, which doesn't have any impact whatsoever. And it makes me feel like you're just saying that just because you have to. Mean it. Really get in there and mean it.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head in the book where you said you began talking to people like they were a family member and someone you cared about.
Yep. That was one of my first sales jobs. Yep. And that taught me so much about how people start opening up. When I started treating them like they were my sister or my mom and dad, they open up and they start trusting you. And it's because where I was coming from, I told myself that I'm going to treat everybody like a family member. And this was 30 years ago. I didn't really even know what the heck I was doing at that time. But I actually felt like I don't want to sell this person something that they don't need, or I don't want to be that salesperson that pushes the pen across the desk and says, sign on the dotted line, when that might not be something that they're willing to do. And boy, did not only my sales went up, my confidence went up, and I started feeling really good about the job I had and really good about the way I was communicating with people. And so for 30 years, that's what I do. I bring that, I pretend like I'm talking to someone who's part of my family or could be part of my new family, which is my business family.
Yeah. And the thing that just keeps resonating for me over and over again, and other than the word resonate, which I think I've said 6 times in this conversation, but it's how important the human element is, how important it is to be you, how important it is to not try to be or do something else. Now you can test those things and you can see what feels comfortable, but if you're walking around, as Liz had said, wearing somebody else's clothes, you're not going to feel your best. You're not going to play your best. So, Liz, what are some of the skills that are out there that people just resist? They resist learning, or they resist incorporating into their craft. They resist honing. What are some of the skills that we resist?
Well, first one is prospecting, is actually doing the work it takes to go find business, but also prospecting in a way that has impact, not prospecting in the way that we did 20 years ago, which is in the past, we did cold calls. Now, what I'm noticing people do is they think they're prospecting, but really all they're doing is sending a cold call in the version of an email to someone. And then they don't understand why it's not working. So they're the same people that will say, cold calling doesn't work, or I hate cold calling, I'm not going to do it. So I'm just going to barge into somebody's inbox with a commercial about myself and how great I am and how much I can help them, when that's the exact same thing as a cold call. I call it a virtual sales pitch. And they just don't realize that that has no impact whatsoever. And they send email after email and don't get anywhere.
Yeah, the beauty of what you're talking about there, I know when we DVR stuff, I just fast forward through the commercials. So what do you think people are doing with the commercial you leave on their voicemail?
That's right. And they all start out with, hi, my name is, and I'm great at this, and I do that, and our company is wonderful at that, and you're kind of crazy if you're not working with us, and call us back at your earliest convenience. And that's been said for 40 years. What are you doing that's different, that's going to pique someone's interest, that's going to make them want to give up a little sliver of their time to call you back, if you've only made it about yourself?
Yeah, I personally like working with people who call me crazy. So when you think of some of the, so from a prospecting perspective, what are some best practices or recommendations that you have on this skill?
Well, first is to leave out all the stupid crap that doesn't work, which is, hi, how are you? Or I hope you're well, right out of the gate. That we have about 3 seconds to capture someone's attention. And do you really care how I am? That makes somebody roll their eyes right out of the gate. So these days, it's get to the point, get in their world, say something that's going to resonate with them. Stop talking about yourself and make it about them. If you know your industry, and if you know the pains, the challenges, the issues, headaches, and heartaches that your potential clients are having, speak to those issues. Let them know that you understand their world, and get in their world. Stop talking about yours. People don't mind hearing from you, but they do mind hearing from you when you make it all about you.
Yeah, and a lot of what you're talking about there is trading. You're trading. They're trading time. You're trading time. They're trading time for information. So how do you increase the value of the trades that you have to potentially deliver to your prospect, your customer, to make them willing to give up that time, willing to give up that attention? Time is a very precious resource.
Right. And why would I give a stranger any time when you haven't gotten into my world? You don't know anything about my business. How about check out my website before you send me an email about how I can help you, how you can help me close more sales? And that just happened to me on LinkedIn. And a woman was wanted to help me attract more clients and close more business. And I just sent her a message back saying, have you read my profile? With 18 question marks. Yeah. You're like, really? Are you like not even taking a little bit of time to figure out who I am and craft a message where I feel like you sat down, looked at my profile, and tapped out a message that resonated with me, not about you. And she said, and then she emailed me back. She said, I did read your profile. And I said, well, then I'm really confused why I would need your help when that's exactly what I do. And it kind of ended there. But I always feel like my inner Jersey girl wants to come out in situations like that. I want to shake people.
Sometimes they need to be shaken.
They do. So I virtually shake them up. So if we can just do a little more homework, tap out an email that looks like I've spent a few minutes learning about who you are and what you do versus just this blanket email or a template that you can download off the internet that works for everyone. I've seen those out there. Download my template that will get you endless appointments every single week. That's not possible. Believing that BS just keeps your business stuck. What does get people to resonate with you or answer your emails and voicemails is when you make it about them and you talk to them from what's going on in their world, not what's happening in your world.
And if you're sending the same email to multiple people, you've got to ask yourself, why am I avoiding doing my job?
Yeah.
Why am I avoiding doing the work? What am I missing? What am I procrastinating?
Yeah.
Why am I going through this effort? Do the work.
Yeah. And I think 2019 is going to be the year of getting people's attention in different ways, because when we tap out an email that sounds like the same one that we've done for the last 20, 30 years, we're going to keep getting the exact same results. If we keep making it about us and not piquing someone's interest, it's going to be deleted and you just keep taking yourself back to 1995. And we got to do something to pique someone's interest, from the subject line to what you say in your emails or in your voicemails. And without piquing interest, you're going to get used to having to work twice as hard.
So what does that research process look like for you? Like let's say you're getting ready to sell something to me, whatever that thing is. Where do you start?
I go right out to Google and I look for either your name or your company. I go on your LinkedIn profile and I read the profile, and then I'll go out to your company, see what you do, how long you've been in business, what's actually happening in your world. Is there any blog posts that tell me anything new and innovative that's happening in your world? I just want to get a sense of, I want to paint the picture in my own head of who I'm talking to. I want to see a face. I want to see the face of the person I'm going to be talking to, even if it's a LinkedIn photo or something off of your website. I want to envision that person when I'm speaking to them, because that helps me make it that human to human conversation. And then when I get on the phone with them, I don't start talking about the weather, the traffic, how nice it is out, and how their weekend was. I get right into the conversation and tell them how I noticed on your LinkedIn profile, or, hey, I was poking around on your LinkedIn profile and I noticed this, or, hey, it was on your website. I want to let them know that I took the time to learn more about them. And sometimes in an email, when they say, I'd like to make an appointment to talk to you about your business, I'll say, not a problem. We figure it out. And I'll ask them, send me a few links or send me the link to your website if it's not in their email, because I'd like to learn a little bit about you and your business before we hop on the phone. And they appreciate that it isn't going to be the same exact conversation that I have with everybody else. Tell me about your business. No, I should know that. I should know who I'm speaking to.
Yeah, and I mean, put yourself in the shoes of the customer here, and the person that you're talking to. I mean, and think about the last time you were on a call with a cell phone provider or a cable company or an insurance provider, and you had to repeat the same thing over and over and over again. And you've wondered on your side, don't they have a CRM? Don't they have some kind of a database where they keep this information? Don't they have some kind of a process that they're moving me through so that I can get to the solution? Don't be that machine.
And that these are the same people that say, I don't want to be salesy. I don't want to come across as pushy, or I don't want to come across as looking like I'm selling something. But that's exactly how you come across when you're saying the same thing to everyone else. You sound robotic. There's nothing in there that's warm and friendly and human.
Don't be a cheeseball.
Yes.
So what's another skill that we can work on?
Oh my gosh, my favorite one is talking about the F word, follow up. And these days, people are either failing to follow up or they're using improper follow up. And that is the main cause of lost sales. You want to give yourself an instant raise, jack up your follow up and where you don't use the F word. And we've all heard that money is in the follow up and don't give up until they say no. Keep touching base until they take a restraining order out on you, and keep following up. And money's in the follow-up. Well, people just keep doing this. They keep following up with people, but what they're doing is saying things like, hey, I'm just following up. Hey, I'm just touching base. Hey, I just wanted to check in and see if you got that proposal. Do you have any questions? Well, that's what everyone else is doing on the planet. And the more you drop the F-bomb or checking in, touching base, reaching out, any of those language words choices, they just don't work anymore because everyone, again, is saying them. And someone told you to follow up over and over, but you never stop to question, is there a better way to follow up? Is there a more productive way to follow up? Why am I following up 7 to 10 times? Maybe my message isn't strong enough. So they're not stopping long enough to figure out, is there a better way to follow up? So they just keep saying things like, I'm just calling to follow up. Hey, haven't heard back from you, so I thought I would follow up again. So after the 10th follow-up, that's when they just give up because there isn't enough energy and momentum in their follow-up messages to get people to, again, give up a sliver of their time to get back to someone.
So how do we create that energy?
So I always say that follow-up is not a task. It is a process. A follow-up is a process. I teach people to, when you're in a conversation with someone, you ask them, how are you and I going to stay in communication? How would you like us to stay in communication? So you're leaving a meeting, and instead of just saying, okay, well, I'll follow up with you, you say, Mary, how do you want us to continue this conversation? Do you want me to get back to you? Or I know you mentioned that you're going away on vacation and you'd get back to me in a couple of weeks. If I don't hear from you, I'm going to reconnect with you so that we don't drop the ball. And you start taking ownership of the way that conversation is going to take place. You don't want Mary to dictate how the follow-up happens because Mary might get so overwhelmed from vacation or from another meeting that she forgets she was even supposed to get back to you. And then you tap out an email that says, hi, I just wanted to follow up, without any mention of why you're following up, or, hey, in our last conversation, we discussed that we would reconnect around this time, hadn't heard from you. So you can do the rewind technique. Let somebody know how your follow-up is going to go. Lay that out.
I think it's so important. And the thing that you've highlighted here is set expectations and execute. Right?
Yep.
And these are mutual expectations. These are expectations that you're setting with a person on the other end.
Yeah.
They're a human being. They have a job to do. They have 800 other things that may be a higher priority than the thing you're asking for. You're competing for this time. Set expectations and execute.
That's right. And if you can say to someone, look, I know that things get crazy. As soon as you and I leave our meeting today, your hair's going to go back on fire, so is mine, and we're going to be putting out fires all day. If something gets in the way that prevents us from either connecting again or takes a little bit longer for us to reconnect with each other, just know that I don't like to drop the ball. And this is what I say. I don't like to drop the ball. So I will make sure that I reconnect with you and let's pick up where we left off, even if it's to say this isn't a priority anymore, or you know what, I found a better solution. Let's not drop the ball on each other because our conversation today was really important.
Yeah. And what that reinforces for me is the idea of this being a relationship. That you are building a relationship with someone who's a person on the other side. So
even saying, I say to people, I don't want to just keep bloating your inbox if the intention isn't to move forward or you've changed your mind or something is a different priority. All I ask is keep the communication lines open and let's be honest with each other. And if it comes to that, I will not cry if you tell me that the deal is off or we're not going to do business. And it's just letting people know that it's okay to say no. It's okay to respond to my email if it's a no. And too many people will say, well, I don't want to say that it's okay to tell me no. I want their business. Well, you don't have any control over that. If somebody wants to say no to you, they're going to say no to you, but they're going to do it by being quiet and blowing you off. Give them permission to be honest with you throughout the whole conversation, your whole time together, whether it's an initial consultation or 6 months into your relationship. Your honesty is always welcomed.
And that's an expectation that you can set with people.
Absolutely.
And you can set it both with the way that you handle your communication with them, but also with the questions you ask and the guidance that you provide them as you start to explain, here's what we've historically seen in this, or here's how organizations have received the best benefit out of this, or here's where challenges have taken place. So now you're, again, just setting those expectations with people. So Liz, what's another skill that we can focus on? We talked about prospecting, improving follow-up. What else would you suggest to the audience?
The next one that jumped out is good questions, good emotional questions, not the stupid stuff like what keeps you up at night. And if I could show you a way to save money on your car insurance, would you sign up today? And all those cheesy lines that just make people roll their eyes. If you are in a deep conversation with someone and you know their pains, problems, challenges, issues, heartaches, and headaches, then drive those questions toward that. Saying things like, Mary, in your industry, we're noticing this is happening. Is that happening to you? Or in our conversation, you mentioned that you've been noticing this happening in your business. I want to find out more about that. Let's get behind that and see what's there. Make your questions sound like a conversation, not a list of probing questions that you downloaded off the internet that don't really move the conversation to that emotional place. It just sort of stays on that logical level.
And I think things like reflective listening are really important.
Yeah.
Using
Say
language.
more. When someone says, say more about that, or, oh, that sounds important. Don't skip over that. Please elaborate on that for me. Or, oh, is there a reason why you mentioned that to me? That if you're really listening, you want to dig deeper into what things that people are sharing with you. Because one topic that somebody drops or a bomb that someone drops, there's usually 5 or 6 more questions that you can get under the surface of that to find out what's really going on. But if you're only doing drive-by questions and doing the questions that are on your list, then that isn't enough to go to the level that really moves and drives business.
And how many times have you been in that situation where you give some information and then all of a sudden the next question has nothing. to do with what you were just talking about?
Yeah. So you send a message that what I just said must not have been important. Even though it was important to me, it wasn't important to you. So it's staying on that topic and that question until you really feel like you got to the root of why they shared that with you.
Awesome. So I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about how do we build out our own process? How do we define that process? How do we create the process? How do we do things that are repeatable? Can you talk to that a bit?
Ooh, okay, because that's going to be unique to you and your business, your goals, and what you're selling. It's obviously going to be very unique, but there still is a foundation to it. You first have to start out mapping out what is the very first thing that someone does. Do they come to your website and fill out a form? If that's the case, then how do you connect with them within the few hours? On your form, does it say I'll connect with you in 48 hours? Or does it say I usually get back to someone in 2 hours? And then do it and get back to someone with a message that's compelling enough for that person who tapped out that message on your website, compelling enough for them to stay in that conversation with you. And then it becomes your sales conversation. What does that sound like? What does it look like? What is the end result? Then if that conversation, maybe it might end with all right, let's schedule another call, or someone's going to sign up right then and there. But it's creating all those steps of what could potentially happen on one of my sales conversations. Or you're meeting a new company and you're doing a demo. What does it look like when you pull it all apart and put it back together? What are all those steps to stay in contact, move the process forward, so that it's almost like each day you're picking it up and moving it to the next place and to the next place the next day. But there's a process and a path that you follow, and you don't drop the ball in any of them. And you don't drop the ball because you don't like a certain, like some people drop the ball at follow-up because they don't like follow-up. So if you don't like follow-up, figure out a way to do your follow-up that you do like, so that you don't bust up your sales process. Because why do everything why go through all the trouble of maybe doing some marketing, some search engine optimization, having a beautiful website, if you're going to drop the ball somewhere that makes the business happen? So figure out where the gaping holes are in your process and start patching them up and figuring out what you need to do. Most people know where they fall apart, and it's a matter of looking at the process holistically and figuring out, all right, this is where I get lazy, or this is where I drop the ball, or I hate asking for the sale. Well, if you hate asking for the sale, then you might want to go and find out some ways to close the business and ask for the business that resonate with you. Otherwise, if you don't ask, you're never going to get the business. So it's individual, but it's really a process of how somebody moves through your process. And if you've closed business before, you know that you use some sort of a process.
Yeah. And I think the key piece for me here is this idea about how individual it is. Like, you know what happens, and you start to get into these modes where you can predict where things might fail, or predict where things might be successful, or predict an indicator that might say, yeah, the likelihood of moving forward is increases or decreases. How does this differ from the process that the company adopts? So let's say I've got to put all my information into Salesforce or some kind of CRM, and I've got all these different stages that I put it in there. How is this piece that we're talking about different from that?
Oh, that's a good question. So obviously, if you have to follow a company process, you have to, but there's also a way to make it your own. There's also a way to do maybe extra things that add to that structured process that a company is making you do, and adding some more bells and whistles that resonate with you. Maybe it's picking up the phone where you're not supposed to pick up the phone. Maybe it's sending someone something through the mail. Is figuring out what could you do that adds that human element to it, that makes people remember you and look different from everyone else who's doing their company process.
Yeah. And again, I think the piece here, just to really hit this home over for the group out there, is make this personal. So yeah, you've got this approach that the organization uses, and they probably use that to help improve forecasting and have more predictability in their forecast. So that was designed with a specific intention.
Yeah.
But as you go through identifying your own process, the gates that you've established that you expect a customer to go through, or if they miss those gates, now you've increased risk. These are things that you will design out that are very personal to you based on how you interact with the buyers or the customers that you interact with directly.
Right. Then it doesn't feel like you're in my process and you'll follow my rules because my company dictated that I do this. You can deviate a little bit from that. You can still follow that, but don't make that other person feel like this is your process and Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, you'll go through my process. You have one that makes it feel like it's collaborative. It's a collaborative process, not just your process.
Yeah, Liz, this conversation really has been great. A couple of the takeaways for me are how important taking a personal approach is, how important the one-to-one relationships are, how important it is to not make assumptions about what you expect the customer to be thinking about, but you ask more questions. Is there anything else that you want to make sure that we cover today, or that you'd like the audience to take away from this discussion?
Just something that just dropped in is, if you don't get the sale, if you don't get the client, if you don't land the deal, get the lesson that was in there. See if there was a lesson in there that you were supposed to learn. Don't just turn around and go, they didn't have the money or they didn't know what they wanted. Assess what happened through that process and see if there's anything in there where you could have learned a lesson or changed something just a little bit to maybe have made it gone a little differently. Get the lesson that's inside every time we either win or lose a sale. Think, what did I do well? Or what do I need to clean up? And sometimes we lose it because we lose it, but look at it a little deeper than just, I got it, I won it, or I lost it, and then moving on to the next one. Take a look at what happened through that process, because sometimes there's a nugget in there that you can use in the next sale.
That is an awesome way to wrap things up. Liz, if folks out there are interested in learning more about you, connecting with you, what are the best places or ways to do that?
They can go to lizwendling.com. They can look me up on LinkedIn, and all of my 5 books are on Amazon. And so if they're interested in seeing what I've written, they can go there as well.
Awesome. And we'll include links in the show notes to each of these places. Liz, thank you very much for the time today. I really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. It was great.
Liz, that was wonderful. And thank you so much, Mike. And if you have found this conversation interesting and helpful, please share it with a colleague and keep the conversation going. Thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.